The black sedan slid into the circular driveway without headlights, tires crunching softly against frozen gravel. Chairman Jang Suk-ho killed the engine and stayed still, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other hovering near his coat where cold steel waited. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 hours. The house was lit up. Every window glowed like it was hosting a celebration, not a quiet Wednesday night. Too bright. Too alive. His jaw tightened. His wife had said she'd be at a charity auction in Seoul until after midnight. Suk-ho checked his watch again. 8:57 p.m. Something was wrong. He stepped out of the car, the wind biting through his coat, snow drifting lazily around him like it didn't understand the danger brewing below. The mansion loomed ahead, beautiful, expensive, and suddenly unfamiliar. As he approached the front steps, sound drifted through the winter air. Laughter. A woman's laugh. Breathless. Intimate. His wife's. Seoko froze. Then another sound followed. A man's voice. Low. Amused. Familiar enough to make his stomach turn. His fingers curled slowly into a fist as his instincts took over. He moved toward the side of the house, boots silent against the stone, following the sound to the partially opened bedroom window. He didn't need to look long. Inside, tangled in silk sheets and warm light, was his wife Yura, and standing close behind her, hands on her waist, was Kong Min-jae, his cousin. Suk-ho's breath came slow and measured, but inside him, something snapped. His hand slid inside his coat, gripping the gun like it was an extension of his pulse. He took one step forward. A hand grabbed his arm. Don't speak. The whisper was sharp, urgent, almost desperate. Suk-ho spun, gun half-raised, eyes locking onto a young woman standing in the shadow near the servants' entrance. Her skin was dark, her hair pulled back tightly, her eyes wide but steady. The maid. He recognized her. Elena, Quiet. Polite. Always invisible. She shook her head once, slowly, her finger pressed to her lips. If you go in there, she whispered, voice trembling, you will not leave this house alive. Suk-ho stared at her, disbelief battling fury. Move, he said, his voice low and lethal. You've forgotten your place. I know my place, she said quickly, and it's the only reason you're still breathing. Inside the room, laughter rose again. Yura's laugh. Carefree, unafraid. Suk-ho's grip tightened on the gun. You have 5 seconds, he said. Start talking. Elena swallowed hard. Snow landed on her lashes and melted instantly. They're planning to kill you, she said. Not tonight. Soon. I heard everything. The words hit harder than the betrayal itself. Suk-ho's eyes flicked back to the window, then to her. You're lying. I wish I was, she said. Please. Not here. She gently pulled his arm, guiding him away from the window, toward the darker side garden where the hedges blocked the lights. He followed, against every instinct he had, because something in her voice wasn't fear alone. It was certainty. They stopped beneath a bare tree, branches creaking above them. Suk-ho yanked his arm free. Speak, he said. And if this is a game, I'll make you regret it. Elena's hands shook as she clasped them together. 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning the study. I thought no one was home. Your wife came in with Min-jae. They didn't see me. Suk-ho's chest felt tight. What did they say? She said the insurance policy was finalized. That after you were gone, everything would be simple. Control of the company, the accounts, the properties. Elena's voice cracked. Min-jae laughed and said, you always trusted family too much. The word family tasted bitter. Seoko exhaled slowly. How are they planning to do it? Elena hesitated. Poison, she whispered, during a celebration. Something public. Something that wouldn't look suspicious. Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. Suk-ho looked back at the glowing windows of his home. The place he built. The life he funded. The woman he protected. Rage burned through him, hot and familiar, begging to be unleashed. I should kill them both, he said calmly. Elena nodded once. You could, but they've planned for that too. If anything happens to them, evidence disappears. Accounts are emptied. Your enemies move in. That gave him pause. You're very informed for a maid, he said. She met his gaze. I had to be. Inside, a cork popped. Cheers followed. The sound of celebration twisted his gut. Sukho turned away, pacing once, then stopping. Why tell me, he asked. You owe me nothing. Elena's eyes softened. Because I couldn't stay silent and watch you die. And because I know what it's like to lose everything. For the first time since stepping out of his car, Sukho didn't feel like the most powerful man in the room. He felt exposed. Go back inside, he said finally. Act normal. She blinked. And you? He looked once more at the window, at his wife, at his cousin. Then he slid the gun back into his coat. I listened, he said. And in that moment, without realizing it, Sukho made the most dangerous decision of his life. Not to pull the trigger. If you're already hooked into the story, pause for 1 second and make sure you're subscribed, like the video, and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. This story only gets darker from here, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Elena slipped back into the house through the servant's door, her posture returning to the careful invisibility she had perfected over months. Sukho stayed outside a moment longer, letting the cold steady him. His heartbeat slowed, but his mind raced. Every instinct screamed betrayal, retaliation, blood. Yet the echo of her words, "You will not leave this house alive," rang louder than the laughter drifting from upstairs. He circled the mansion and entered through the rear hall, footsteps soundless on polished floors. Voices floated from the living room. Glasses clinked. Music played softly. He passed through the space like a ghost, unseen, unacknowledged, and headed for his private study. The door closed behind him with a click that felt final. He stood there, hands braced on the desk, breathing through his nose. Anger was familiar. This was different. This was cold. Minutes later, the door opened without a knock. Victor Hahn stepped in, tall and lean, eyes alert. He had arrived without being summoned. That alone told Sukho something had already shifted. You came home early, Victor said. So did my wife, Sukho replied. Victor's jaw tightened. I sensed movement. Accounts pinged. Unusual calls. Sukho looked up. How long have you suspected? Long enough to be careful with my suspicions, Victor said. Short enough to still be surprised. Sukho nodded once. We don't confront. We observe. Victor studied him. That's not like you. It is now. A pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Victor broke it first. What do you need? Proof, Sukho said. Not rumors. Not instincts. Evidence that survives daylight. Victor inclined his head. Then we start tonight. Upstairs, Yura laughed again. The sound crawled under Sukho's skin. He poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. The next days passed with a precision that felt unreal. Sukho played the husband, attentive and distant in equal measure. Yura didn't notice, or didn't care. She kissed his cheek absently, asked about his trip, told him he looked tired. Min-jae visited more often. Each visit tightened the coil in Sukho's chest. His cousin moved through the house like he owned it, confidence bordering on arrogance. They spoke in low tones when they thought no one was listening. They smiled too easily. Elena listened. She moved quietly, ears open, heart pounding, cataloging every word, every glance, every pause. At night, she typed notes on a phone hidden beneath her mattress. Names, dates, snippets of conversations that made her hands shake. One evening, she knocked on the study door. Sir, she said softly. Sukho didn't look up. Speak. They finalized the date, she said. His pen stopped mid-stroke. When? New Year's Eve. Silence fell. They said it has to look natural, Elena continued. A toast. Something symbolic. Something everyone expects you to drink. Sukho leaned back slowly. What else? Min-jae said the poison leaves the system quickly. No trace. He joked that by morning, they'd be planning the funeral. Her voice broke on the last word. Sukho closed his eyes. When he opened them, his gaze was steady. You've done well, he said. From now on, you tell Victor everything you tell me. Elena hesitated. And if they suspect me? They won't, Sukho said. Because they think you're invisible. She nodded. Invisibility had always been her shield. She didn't know it would become a weapon. The investigation deepened. Victor installed discreet surveillance. Calls were recorded. Transfers traced. Every thread pulled revealed another knot of betrayal. The insurance policy was real. The beneficiaries were clear. The poison, imported under the guise of supplements, was already in the house. Sukho held it once, sealed in a small vial, light glinting off the glass. Death, reduced to something that fit in his palm. You could end this tonight, Victor said quietly. Sukho returned the vial to the safe. Not yet. Why wait? Because I want them exposed, Sukho said. Not just stopped. Victor studied him. And after? Sukho's answer came, without hesitation. After, I choose who I become. New Year's Eve arrived wrapped in elegance. The mansion glittered. Guests filled the rooms with laughter and music and the illusion of safety. Elena moved among them, serving drinks, eyes sharp. Victor blended in near the edges, watchful. Yura wore red. She smiled like a woman unburdened by guilt. Min-jae clinked his glass. To family, he said. Sukho raised his own, meeting his cousin's eyes. To family, he echoed. The countdown began. 10, 9. Elena's breath caught as Victor's hand brushed her sleeve, signal given. The glasses were switched with practiced ease. 8, 7. Sukho lifted the glass to his lips, then stopped. 6, 5. Before we toast, he said, voice carrying, calm and clear, there's something I'd like to share. The room stilled. Yura frowned. 6, 4, 3. A recording played. Yura's voice. Min-jae's laughter. Words that couldn't be taken back. 2, 1. The truth detonated as fireworks lit the sky. The room erupted into chaos before the echo of the recording even faded. Glass shattered somewhere near the fireplace. A woman gasped. Someone cursed under their breath. Yura's face drained of color as she stared at the speakers like they had betrayed her personally. Turn that off, she said sharply, her voice too loud, too controlled. This is a joke. Sukho, turn it off. Min-jae moved faster. He lunged toward the sound system, but Victor stepped into his path, hand firm on his shoulder. Don't, Victor said quietly. Min-jae froze. His eyes flicked around the room, calculating. Always calculating. You don't understand what you're doing, he said, forcing a laugh. This is a private family matter. Sukho set his glass down on the table, untouched. The poison drink sat inches away, innocent in appearance, lethal in intent. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This stopped being private the moment you decided my death would be convenient, he said. Yura shook her head, stepping toward him. You're overreacting. You always do this. You hear something, you assume the worst. Another recording played. Clear this time. Detailed. Dates. Methods. The word poison spoken without hesitation. Yura stumbled back as if struck. No, she whispered. That's not. Sukho, listen to me. I am listening, he said. That's the problem. Min-jae's jaw clenched. You think this ends well for you? He snapped. You think exposing us makes you safe? Sukho finally looked at him fully. No, he said. It makes me free. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Yura's head snapped toward the windows. What did you do? I told the truth, Sukho replied. And I invited witnesses. Detective Park Jun-suk entered moments later with uniformed officers. The shift in the room was immediate, fear replacing confusion. Park's eyes swept the scene, landing on Sukho. Chairman Jang, he said. We have warrants. Min-jae tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps. Yura collapsed into a chair, sobbing, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You ruined everything, she cried. We could have had it all. Sukho watched as they were taken away, hands cuffed, dignity stripped bare. He felt no triumph, only a hollow stillness where rage had once lived. After the guests left and the lights dimmed, the mansion felt larger than ever. Sukho sat alone in the study, staring at nothing. The silence pressed in, heavy and unfamiliar. A soft knock broke it. Elena, he said. She stepped in cautiously. They're gone. I know. She lingered near the door. Are you all right? Sukho considered the question. No, he said. But I will be. She nodded, unsure what else to say. You saved my life, he continued. Why? Elena took a breath. Because someone once stayed silent for me, and I paid the price. He studied her, seeing her clearly for the first time, not as staff, not as a shadow, but as a person who had chosen courage when it mattered. You should leave, he said suddenly. Her eyes widened. Did I do something wrong? No, he said. You've done enough. Go back to school. Finish what you started. She hesitated. I don't have the money. You will, he said. Consider it a debt I owe. Tears filled her eyes. Thank you. Months passed. Sukho dismantled pieces of his empire with deliberate care, selling, closing, legitimizing. Power slipped from his hands, and with it, a weight he hadn't known he carried. Elena wrote him once, then again. Updates. Grades. Gratitude. He replied less often, but he read every word. One evening, years later, Sukho stood on a balcony overlooking a city that no longer feared him. Elena joined him, older now, steadier. Do you ever regret it? She asked. He thought of the whisper in the dark, of the gun he never fired, of the life that followed. No, he said. I regret that it took almost losing everything to find myself. She smiled softly. Sometimes that's the only way. If this story moved you, now's the perfect moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive, and the ending is closer than you think. Elena didn't leave the city right away. The night she packed her bags, she stood in her small room staring at the folded clothes on the bed, heart pounding like she was abandoning something unfinished. She told herself it was fear talking. Fear of returning to a life where no one knew her name. Fear of losing the strange sense of purpose she'd found by speaking when silence would have been safer. Sukho watched her car disappear through the gate from the study window. He told himself it was better this way. Distance was clean. Distance was safe. The next weeks tested that belief. The board questioned him relentlessly. Partners called at odd hours, their voices polite but probing. Rivals circled like sharks, sensing weakness. For the first time in decades, Sukho attended meetings without a weapon at his side. He noticed how often his hands still reached for where it used to be. Victor noticed too. You're changing the rules mid-game, Victor said one evening as they reviewed ledgers. Some people won't forgive that. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sukho replied. I'm closing doors. Victor leaned back, and opening new ones. Sukho didn't answer. He thought of Elena's words. Sometimes that's the only way. The investigation fallout spread quickly. News leaked. Headlines danced around the truth without naming it outright. Investors panicked. Enemies whispered. Friends vanished. Sukho felt lighter and lonelier all at once. One night, unable to sleep, he walked through the mansion. Rooms echoed with memories, laughter that now felt staged, promises that had rotted quietly. He stopped outside the guest room Elena had used briefly after the arrests. The door was locked, untouched. He didn't open it. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. I started classes today. I was scared, but I remembered what you said about choosing who you become. I think I'm choosing too. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer he rarely used. The drawer filled over time. Sukho's transformation wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. He sold a warehouse here, dissolved a shell company there. He moved money into clean ventures, logistics, property development, shipping routes that followed laws instead of shadows. Each signature felt like shedding an old skin. Not everyone accepted it. One afternoon, a former associate confronted him in the parking garage. You think you can just walk away? The man sneered. After everything? Sukho met his gaze. I already did. The man hesitated. Something in Sukho's eyes, calm, unafraid, made threats feel pointless. He backed away without another word. Months turned into a year. Elena visited once during a break. They met in a quiet cafe far from the mansion. She looked different, confident, shoulders squared, eyes brighter. You look well, Sukho said. So do you, she replied, quieter. They talked about classes, about the city, about nothing that mattered, and everything that did. When they parted, there was no promise, No expectation. Just an understanding that some connections didn't need definitions. The second visit came sooner. Then a third. People noticed. Victor raised an eyebrow one evening. Careful, he said. Feelings complicate things.
Seoko smiled faintly.
So does emptiness. The shift in their relationship was subtle. Conversations lingered. Silences felt comfortable. Elena challenged him without fear. She asked questions no one else dared. Do you miss it? She asked once. The power? He considered. I miss who I thought it made me. She nodded. Then you're doing the right thing. Their bond grew not from rescue or debt, but from choice. Mutual respect. Shared quiet. When Sukho finally filed for divorce, there was no drama. Yura didn't fight it. She barely looked at him across the table. The woman who once laughed so freely now seemed hollow. As he left the courthouse, he felt the last thread snap. Years passed. Sukho's name began appearing in different contexts: charity galas, scholarship announcements, redevelopment projects. The whispers changed tone. Fear softened into curiosity. Respect, earned slowly, replaced notoriety. Elena graduated with honors. Sukho sat in the back row, unnoticed, applauding until his hands hurt. Later, she found him outside. You didn't have to come. I wanted to, he said. She smiled, radiant. So did I. Their wedding was small.
No spectacle.
No press. Just friends, quiet vows, and a future unburdened by secrets. When Elena took his hand, Sukho felt something settle inside him at last. Children followed, laughter echoing through halls that once knew only tension. Sukho learned patience the hard way, then the right way. He learned that power wasn't control, it was presence. One evening, years later, he stood in the garden where everything had changed. Snow fell softly, just like that night. Elena joined him, slipping her hand into his. Do you ever think about it? She asked. All the time, he said. She squeezed his hand. I'm glad you listened. He looked at her, at the life they'd built from a whisper and a choice. So am I. Sukho often thought the hardest part of changing his life would be walking away from violence. He was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to live with peace. Peace was quiet. It didn't demand anything from him. It didn't respond to fear.
It didn't bow.
In the early months of his new life, that silence unsettled him more than gunfire ever had. There were nights he woke up expecting alarms, footsteps, threats. Instead, there was only the soft breathing of the woman beside him and the distant hum of the city. Elena would stir and place a hand on his chest, grounding him without a word. You're safe, she would murmur, half asleep. The word safe still felt foreign. Business dinners replaced underground meetings. Contracts replaced threats. Sukho learned quickly that legitimacy came with its own kind of danger, scrutiny. Regulators asked questions. Journalists dug into the past. Old rivals tested boundaries, probing to see if the man they once feared still existed. Some nights, Victor would call. They're watching you, he said once. Not criminals. The other kind.
Seoko smiled faintly.
Then I must be doing something right. Victor exhaled. You always were stubborn. I learned from the best. Their friendship evolved too. No longer built on survival, but loyalty. Victor stayed not because he had to, but because he chose to. Elena finished her degree and started working with a nonprofit focused on education access. She moved through the world with quiet confidence, her voice steady even when challenging people twice her age. Sukho watched her from the sidelines, pride swelling in his chest in a way that surprised him. One evening, after a long day, she asked him, Do you ever feel like you don't deserve this? He didn't pretend. Every day. She nodded.
Good.
That means you won't take it for granted. Their children came into their lives like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Isabella first, curious, observant, always watching. Then Lucas, loud, fearless, laughing like the world was a playground. Sukho held them both like fragile miracles, terrified of doing anything wrong. Relax, Elena teased once as he hovered. They're tougher than you think. He shook his head. Not tougher than the world. Then teach them how to face it, she said. Not how to fear it. Those words stayed with him. Sukho became known for something else now, second chances. He hired people others wouldn't. Former convicts.
Immigrants.
Those willing to work honestly, but shut out by their past. He didn't ask for explanations. Only commitment. A reporter once asked him, "Why do you do it?" He answered simply, "Because someone once believed I could be more than what I was." The reporter didn't know how true that was. Not everyone welcomed his transformation. One night, long after the children were asleep, a brick shattered the front window. A message was taped to it. A warning from someone who hadn't forgiven him for walking away. Sukho stood in the broken glass, heart pounding, old instincts roaring back. Elena stepped beside him. "What are you thinking?" "That I could end this," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "And what would that cost?" He looked down at his hands. They were steady. "Everything," he admitted. The next morning he reported it.
No retaliation. No threats.
Just process. It felt like reclaiming another piece of himself. Years rolled forward, smooth and uneven in turns. Birthdays, graduations, late-night talks on the balcony. Moments that seemed small but built something solid. Sukho aged into his life instead of out of it. One winter evening, much like the night everything began, snow fell over the city. Sukho stood by the window, watching flakes drift down, memories stirring. Elena joined him. "You're thinking about that night again." He smiled softly. "I always do when it snows." She leaned into him. "If you could go back, would you change anything?" He thought of the rage, the gun, the whisper. "No," he said, "because then I wouldn't be here." She nodded, content with the answer. Later that night, after the house had settled, Sukho went into his study and opened the drawer where he kept Elena's letters. He read the first one again, the shaky handwriting, the hope wrapped in fear. So much had grown from that moment of courage. He closed the drawer and turned off the light. Outside, the city breathed, unaware of how close one life had come to ending and how many had been changed because it didn't. If this story has made you feel something, stay with us. The final chapters bring everything full circle. The past never vanished completely. It waited, quietly, patiently. Sukho learned that the hard way one afternoon when Victor walked into his office unannounced, his expression tighter than it had been in years. He didn't sit. He closed the door first. "There's movement," Victor said. Sukho looked up from the document he was signing. "What kind?" "The kind we hoped was finished," Victor replied. "Min Jae is talking." The name hit like a punch to the chest. "He's in prison," Sukho said slowly. "What leverage does he have?" "Enough to be dangerous," Victor answered. "He's offering names.
Routes.
Old alliances. And he's painting you as the mastermind who escaped justice." Sukho leaned back, fingers steepled. "And they're listening?" "They always listen when the story is convenient." For the first time in years, the old tension crept back into Sukho's shoulders. Not fear, something sharper. Responsibility. "I won't run," Sukho said. "And I won't fight it the old way." Victor nodded. "I figured." The weeks that followed felt like walking through fog. Investigators requested interviews. Lawyers asked uncomfortable questions. Reporters circled again, hungry for a redemption story turned scandal. Elena noticed the change immediately. "You're carrying it alone," she said one night as they sat at the kitchen table long after the children were asleep. "I don't want it touching you," Sukho replied. She reached across the table and took his hand. "You don't get to decide that anymore." He smiled faintly. Still stubborn. She squeezed his fingers. "Still listening?" That question settled him. Sukho cooperated fully. Every record opened. Every account examined. He told the truth, even when it made him look worse than silence ever could. Especially then. Some nights, doubt crept in. He wondered if this was the price of redemption, never quite free of who he'd been. He stood in his study one evening, staring at the city lights, when a small voice broke the quiet. "Daddy." Isabella stood in the doorway, hair tousled, eyes sleepy. He knelt immediately. "What is it?" "You look sad," she said simply. Children saw everything. He pulled her into his arms. "I'm just thinking." She rested her head against his shoulder. "Mom says thinking is good, but not if it hurts." He laughed softly. "Your mom is wise." "I know," Isabella said, already drifting back to sleep. That night, Sukho slept easier. The investigation dragged on, but the truth held. Min-jae's story unraveled under scrutiny. Evidence contradicted him. Motives were exposed. The man who once believed himself untouchable was revealed as desperate. When the final report came, Sukho read it alone. Cleared of wrongdoing in the present. Acknowledged for cooperation. Watched, but free. He closed the folder and exhaled a breath he felt he'd been holding for years. Elena hugged him tightly when he told her. "I never doubted you," she said. "I did," he admitted. "Sometimes." "That's human," she replied. "What matters is what you did next." The foundation they had built together expanded. Scholarships funded. Community centers opened. Sukho attended openings quietly, preferring to listen rather than speak. When he did speak, it was brief. "Use what you're given well," he told a group of students once. "And don't waste the moment someone believes in you." The words were met with applause, but what stayed with him were the eyes. Hopeful, determined, alive with possibility.
Years passed gently after that.
Victor retired, finally convinced the world wouldn't collapse without him watching it. They met occasionally for drinks, old friends sharing stories that no longer involved survival. "You did it," Victor said once, lifting his glass. "You escaped." Sukho shook his head.
No.
"I stayed." On the anniversary of the night, everything changed. Sukho returned to the garden alone. Snow dusted the ground lightly. He stood beneath the same bare tree, hands in his coat pockets, breath visible in the cold air. Footsteps approached behind him. Elena joined him without a word. "Still thinking?" she asked. "Always," he said, but not with regret. She smiled. "Good." They stood there together, listening to the quiet.
No sirens. No whispers.
Just the soft certainty of a life rebuilt. Time had a way of softening even the sharpest memories, but it never erased them. It reshaped them, gave them context, turned pain into something that could be carried without cutting too deep. Sukho learned that as the years settled into a rhythm he once believed was impossible for a man like him. Mornings began with noise now. Children arguing over cereal. Elena reminding them to put on their coats. Sukho standing by the door, tying shoelaces, listening to the ordinary chaos that still amazed him. There were days he caught himself smiling for no reason at all, just because this life existed. Yet the past still tested him in quiet ways. At a charity dinner one evening, a man approached him with a familiar stiffness in his posture. Former underworld.
Former ally.
The kind of man who measured respect by fear. "You really changed," the man said, eyes scanning the room. "Or is this just another disguise?" Sukho met his gaze calmly. Disguises come off eventually. This doesn't. The man studied him, then nodded once and walked away.
No threats. No promises.
Just acknowledgement. Sukho felt a strange relief. Not because he'd been believed, but because he didn't need to convince anyone anymore. Later that night, Elena noticed his silence. "Someone from before?" she asked. "Yes." And it didn't matter, he said, surprised to realize it was true. They sat on the balcony, city lights stretching endlessly below them. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said, "if you hadn't listened that night." "I know," he replied. "I wouldn't be here." "Neither would I," she added softly. He turned to her. "You would have found another way." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But this one mattered." Sukho often thought about how close he'd come to choosing differently. How easily anger could have erased everything. The gun, the window, the whisper. 1 second in either direction, and the story would have ended in blood instead of growth. That knowledge made him patient. When Lucas came home one afternoon angry after a fight at school, fists clenched, eyes burning, Sukho knelt in front of him and listened. He didn't lecture. He didn't correct immediately. "What did you want to do?" Sukho asked. "Hit him," Lucas said honestly. "And what stopped you?" Lucas hesitated. "I thought about you." Sukho felt something tighten in his chest. "What did you think?" "That you don't hit anymore," Lucas said. "You talk." Sukho pulled his son into a hug, eyes closing briefly. "I'm proud of you." That night, after the children were asleep, Elena said quietly, "He's learning from you." So am I, Suko replied. The foundation expanded internationally. Partnerships formed. Suko traveled, but always returned quickly. He no longer ran from home. He ran toward it. During one trip, a journalist asked him a question he'd heard many times before. Do you believe people can truly change? Suko didn't answer right away. He thought of Elena standing in the shadows, of fear transformed into courage, of a life paused on the edge of violence. Yes, he said finally, but only when someone dares to interrupt them. The article went viral. Messages poured in, some skeptical, some grateful. One stood out. Asterisk, I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have. Your story made me speak. Asterisk. Suko read it twice and closed his eyes. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Elena found him in the study holding the old vial. The one Victor had kept all those years as evidence. It was empty now, harmless, but Suko still treated it with care. You keep it to remember? She asked. To respect the moment, he replied. And to remind myself that listening saved me. She took it gently from his hand and placed it back in the drawer. You don't need reminders anymore. Maybe not, he said, but I don't want to forget. They attended a small gathering that evening, former scholarship recipients celebrating their first businesses, first books, first achievements. Laughter filled the room, genuine and unguarded. Elena spoke with ease. Suko listened more than he spoke. One young man approached him nervously. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, why did you choose this path? Suko considered him carefully. Because someone believed I could be more than my worst moment. The young man nodded slowly. I hope to be that for someone else one day. So do I, Suko said. Late that night, as they drove home, Elena glanced at him. You've built something that will outlive us. He shook his head. We have. Snow began to fall lightly, dusting the windshield. Suko slowed the car, memories rising unbidden. Do you remember what you said to me that night? He asked.
Elena smiled.
Don't speak. And you were right, he said. If I had, everything would have ended. She reached for his hand. But you listened. The car rolled on through the quiet streets, carrying a man who once ruled by fear and now lived by choice. If this story has stayed with you this far, take a second to like the video and share your thoughts in the comment. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. The years that followed felt like borrowed time in the best way possible. Not stolen, not rushed, earned. Suko found himself paying attention to details he once ignored. The way Elena hummed softly while cooking. The way Isabella counted her steps between cracks in the pavement. The way Lucas laughed too loudly, too freely, like the world had never once frightened him. That was the life he protected now. Not with threats. Not with fear. With presence. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for a new community center, Suko received a call from a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it. Old habits died slowly. Chairman Zhang, a voice said when he answered. Younger. Nervous. My name is Sunwoo. I was told you might understand. Suko leaned back in his chair. Understand what? There's something happening where I work, the man said. Something illegal. Dangerous. Everyone knows, but no one speaks. I heard your story. Suko closed his eyes briefly. Why are you calling me? He asked. Because I'm scared, Sunwoo admitted. And because I don't want to become someone I can't live with. The words felt painfully familiar. You're already ahead, Suko said. You called. They spoke for nearly an hour. Suko didn't give orders. He didn't promise protection. He listened. When the call ended, he provided legal contacts, guidance, and one final sentence. Silence protects the problem, he said. Not you. That night, Elena noticed his distant gaze. You talked to someone today, she said. Yes, he replied. Someone standing where I once stood. And I told him what you taught me. She smiled softly. Then the circle keeps moving. Suko understood then that legacy wasn't buildings or money or even reputation. It was moments passed forward. Courage taught quietly. Choices echoed. As the children grew older, questions came more frequently. Why do people recognize you? Isabella asked one day.
Seoko paused.
Because I used to be someone different.
Bad.
Lucas asked bluntly. Sukho considered the question carefully. Lost, he said. And then I found my way. Elena watched him from the doorway, eyes warm. She never corrected him, never softened the truth unnecessarily. They agreed early on that honesty mattered more than comfort. On a school assignment, Isabella once wrote about heroes. When Sukho read it later, alone in his study, his throat tightened. My hero listens before he acts, she had written. He wasn't always like that, but he chose to be. He folded the paper carefully and placed it in the same drawer as the letters. Courage recognized courage. Time passed. Faces changed. Seasons turned. One winter, heavier than the others, Sukho caught a cold that lingered. Elena insisted he rest. He hated it. Stillness always made him reflective. Lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling and thought about the alternate version of his life, the one that ended in that bedroom window, gun raised, heart blind with rage. He wondered how many lives had brushed against the edge of ruin without ever realizing it. Elena sat beside him, reading quietly. Do you ever think about what people would say about you if you were gone? He asked suddenly. She lowered the book. Why would you ask that? Because I want it to be right, he said. Not impressive. Not frightening. Just true. She reached for his hand. Then keep living the way you are. He smiled faintly. That's simple? She smiled back. That hard. The foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary with little fanfare.
No speeches. No cameras.
Just stories from people whose lives had changed in ways too personal for headlines. Sukho listened as one woman spoke through tears about going back to school at 40. Another man talked about starting over after prison. Elena caught Sukho's eye across the room. In her expression was the same quiet determination he'd seen that first night in the shadows. Later, as they walked home, snow falling gently around them, Sukho said, If you hadn't whispered that night. She interrupted softly. If you hadn't listened. They stopped walking. Streetlights cast long shadows behind them. Do you know why I spoke? She asked. He shook his head. Because I realized silence would make me complicit, she said. And I couldn't carry that. He took her hands, eyes steady. You carried me instead. They stood there, the city breathing around them, two lives intertwined by a single moment of courage. The night Sukho finally told the full story, there were no cameras, no audience, no speeches prepared. It happened quietly, the way the most important truths usually did. Isabella was studying late at the kitchen table, books spread out, frustration written all over her face. Lucas sat nearby, pretending to do homework while sneaking looks at his tablet. Elena moved between them, offering encouragement, patience endless as ever. Sukho watched them for a long moment before speaking. Did you know, he said gently, that one decision can divide your life into before and after? Isabella looked up. Like what? He sat down slowly, choosing his words with care. Like choosing to listen when anger tells you not to. Lucas tilted his head. Did that ever happen to you? Elena